Okay, hi everyone. This is A.J. Allegra. I'm the artistic director of the NOLA Projects here in our COVID quarantine. But I have an exciting thing, which is I'm joined today by New Orleans hometown boy and Broadway legend, Michael Cerveris. Michael is a dual resident of New Orleans and New York, and is known well throughout both cities as a performer on stage, on screen, on film, and also as a very accomplished musician. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today for this digital Zoom interview.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to to talk to other people.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about, what's your COVID story right now? Where are you hanging out, and what's life been like over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I was in New York when things started to be shut down, and um, Kimberly Kay, who is my singing partner in Loose Cattle, and I were supposed to have some gigs up in New York, and she had just uh, gone with her mom on a cruise that was going to finish in New York. So we set up these gigs while she was going to be up there, taking advantage of the time that she was up there because she lives in New Orleans full time. Um, and then we found ourselves sort of stuck there and couldn't do the gigs. We did a live stream from the sofa in my apartment
Very nice.
early on. Um, and then she ultimately flew back home to New Orleans, but I had to stay around New York. And then, so my intention at first was just to stay in New York unless there was a reason to leave. Um, and as things got more and more dire there, I started thinking maybe my philosophy should be, is there a reason to stay, actually?
Hmm.
And there wasn't particularly. I mean, I couldn't do anything to help anybody, that I couldn't do online from someplace else. And I also wanted to ultimately get to Pittsburgh, to my dad's place, and try to look after him, but I didn't want to go there straight from New York. So I thought I would kind of self quarantine. I'd already spent like 2.5 or 3 weeks in New York self quarantined
Yeah.
because I took it seriously, like right off the bat when they first started saying to limit your time outside. Um, so I did that, and then I decided, well, I'll go someplace where I can just kind of be outside of New York and quarantine for a while there until I feel more confident that I wouldn't be jeopardizing my dad to come to see him.
Sure.
So that's what I'm doing now. I found this place in rural northeastern Pennsylvania that's remote but not totally isolated, and it means that I can be out around trees and stuff, and I can take my dog Evie, Evangeline, who's, you may hear her chewing her bone in the background
That's
while we
great.
while we talk. Um, so so I've had a much healthier experience in the last couple weeks than I was having while I was holed up just in my New York apartment.
Okay.
It's so
So
wild, the way everybody's experiences are so different depending on where they have to be confined and how confining that is.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, I'm here at my in-laws, place, which is on a large amount of land on the North Shore. Back in New Orleans, I live on Magazine Street, and
Right,
although I have a house, I
right.
can't imagine what it's like right now for all of my friends and in that are in Manhattan. In
Yeah,
tiny studio apartments, often with roommates that is not blood relations, to be quarantined like that.
yeah. It's a fascinating sociological experiment, and I I think we're going to see, the world's going to look a lot different when we
When we come out of it.
come out of this. Yeah.
So you're quarantined there somewhere up in the woods in Pennsylvania. What have you been doing to I don't know, to fight the isolation boredom?
Well, it's funny. I haven't felt a lot of boredom. I mean, initially, I think like a lot of people, I initially thought, this is going to be great. I can finally like clean out all those closets and go through all those papers and books that I've been meaning to do forever and never had the time. And I thought that's what my quarantine experience was going to be like in New York. And I was just going to come out of it with this pristine, organized home.
Immaculate apartment.
Yeah. But I was so distracted and so unable to focus on anything and unable to concentrate on a task, unable to even concentrate on any kind of movie or book or anything that required actual attention in the early days of it. And because when I still had to go outside to walk Evie, um, and to occasionally get food and stuff, so it was just so anxiety producing every time I went outside that I just carried that back inside. And I was trying to keep to a schedule and exercise and stuff like that. Now that I'm out here, I still have fought some of that distraction, and I've had to really limit the amount of news. I literally will only let myself kind of cruise the headlines for 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes, not before bed, but like, dinner time ish
I
kind of.
agree. I've been watching way less news than I
Yeah.
normally would consume.
Yeah, exactly. Because there is, it's really limited what you can do and what you can do with the knowledge that you have at the moment. I feel like I need to keep somewhat on top of things, but I really do not need to hear what our president has to say about anything. Um, I
Agreed.
mean, that's been true since 2016, but
That's been for a while now.
yeah.
So I assume
Um,
have you been playing music and whatnot to pass
I
the time?
have. Yeah, I've been playing music. I've been piece by piece kind of putting together this recording system thanks to Amazon and Sweetwater Sound. And because the band Loose Cattle is all, everybody else is in New Orleans, but obviously all sequestered in their own places. So we had a Zoom band meeting the other night just to kind of see each other and hang out a little bit. And we've decided there are a few songs that we're going to record, and I'll do my parts and send them to Doug Garrison, our drummer, and he'll send those on to Renee Coleman, our bass player, and then they'll send those on to Rurik Noonan, who's our fiddle player, and then they'll send them to Kim, and then hopefully our friend Mark Bingham will mix it all for us. And so we want to continue to do stuff. We have a record that we had just finished mixing and mastering that was going to come out in April because we had a slot at French Quarter Fest. So it was all time to kind of come out at the same time. And now that's not happening till we think October. And so the album is pushed back, but it's all done. So that gives us more time to kind of, I'm hoping that now I'm just now starting to feel like I'm in a place where I can kind of have the space in my head to try to start creating, although it's really hard to know what you want to say. And I think, theater people and artists of all sorts are trying to figure that out. Some people have an immediate reaction and are, immediately pouring out content, by the moment. And, but my instinct has really been to kind of use the forced retreat as a real retreat and to take time and take stock and sit with this experience of being disconnected. And my instinct is to have less interaction and less contact, which is at odds with the general feeling that, that most people seem to have of wanting to have more contact than ever. So I find myself online on Zoom chats and FaceTimes, doing interviews or catching up with friends, or the groups of casts who haven't seen each other for decades in some cases suddenly want to all try to get together, which is great, but it really does start to feel like a job just keeping up with people.
Sure.
um, so
I
you know
know that
it's
you did the Fun Home reunion
yeah,
online. That looked like it was fun. And then
it was really great.
what I guess um do you have any jobs that got preempted because of COVID? I'm curious
Yeah,
about like if there was something that you had that you were excited about.
yeah, I was just about to start a TV series for HBO that I guess I still can't talk about because they hadn't announced it yet, but it's a really cool thing, and I'll tell you later. And then when you can tell people, I'll tell you. Um, And that's fortunately one of those shows. It's a little too big to fail kind of show. Like
Hmm.
they've made clear that that it will get made. It's been pushed back twice now, and now they're just saying it's on indefinite hiatus because they don't want to keep making plans and having to change them again.
Right.
Um, and then there was also a movie that I was supposed to do for 3 weeks in April. I was supposed to be there right now in Pittsburgh filming this movie, and that likewise has been kind of put on hold. But I'm I'm thinking that possibly that might happen a little faster because it's a smaller thing and
Right.
involves fewer people, and they might be a little more flexible. And they apparently have their money already in the bank and stuff. Um, so, so my two things, I'm really fortunate in that it seems right now anyway that they will happen. It's just making ends meet until then. But so many of my friends are had shows that they thought they were going to be doing for the next year or so, or were just opening shows, or
Yeah.
still had another, had their last weekend ahead of them, and suddenly the plugs just pulled. And you know how that is, like when you when something if something happens in a performance and you can't finish a show that night because of some technical problem or something. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it leaves you with this huge hollow empty feeling
Yeah. It's a
because
very incompleted.
yeah,
You need to complete the journey in order to feel the catharsis to
yeah,
close it. Yeah. I imagine a lot of long time running shows, even shows that potentially maybe on Broadway they had closing dates that people could kind of mentally prepare for. Oh, we're closing in June, we're closing in
right,
August. To suddenly get cut off, it
yeah.
feels like it must feel absolutely just discombobulating
And
emotionally.
so much of your social life is you're seeing those people
Yeah.
every night, and you are so close to them as a as a working family. Um and suddenly you're told that, I mean, I imagine they were allowed back in the dressing room to get their personal stuff that they needed, like computers or whatever they'd
Yeah.
left. But other than that, I mean, it's jarring when you're doing a show and it closes unexpectedly anyway, but this is like that times 1,000.
Yeah, I'm
And
curious. Is there any? Because you know, people that are watching this are probably theater fans, so they know that you've had quite a storied career, both doing original works, musicals, plays, classical theater. Is there any cast that you talk about your cast becomes somewhat of your social life and your social scene? Is there any cast that you can particularly point to as a memorably like social group that you really enjoyed hanging out with, that you would welcome a Zoom call from?
well, I've been lucky that that's kind of been true of just about every cast that I've been a part of. Certainly the majority of them. I remember Assassins was a particularly socially gathering kind of group. Like we I it seemed like every single night we would leave the theater and go to, maybe it was because it was a one act, and so we just like
Sure.
did it straight through and felt like, well, it's still early, we can get to the bar early. But we went to this place called Vintage on, I think it was Ninth Avenue, and that was our hangout. And nearly every night we would all go out there. And
That's
um
fantastic. I wish I had known that when I saw the show. I would have come.
yeah,
I would have come and bothered you all.
exactly. And Tommy, was the real start of that for me. And we used to go to a place called O'Flaherty's on 46th Street, this Irish bar that
Oh, I
had,
know of Flaherty's. They had fabulous hamburgers.
yes, they did. And
They
they
were
had
well
like,
known for that.
yeah. And they had that pool table in the back.
Mhm.
And I had found that place when I came to New York to audition for the Broadway production of Tommy after having done it in La Jolla, but I still had to come to New York to audition for the Broadway version. And I had a disastrous audition, and a friend of mine said, well, come, I live over this bar on 46th Street, come hang out here, and it's a great place to hang out. And nobody knew it then. It was just like this little dive bar on 46th Street. But so when I did get the job and we came back later, and we're actually working on Broadway, I said to everybody, oh man, we got to go hang out at this bar because it's a great place and it'll be really fun. And it became the Tommy Hangout, which is why it ultimately became this big Broadway hangout, and all the shows would hang out there. And then for a while, it started to become different college training programs would kind of adopt it. So for a while, it was like, the Tommy people and the other Broadway people, and then half the graduated class of Carnegie Mellon suddenly was there, or, Michigan or different places.
Yeah.
But Pete Townsend used to show up and hang out with us and would play guitar in the back room, just,
Wow.
ungiven anything. I remember one night sitting in a booth with Liza Minnelli on my right, Cheetah Rivera on the other side of her, and Pete Townsend on my left, all at the same booth. And I was just like, this is weird.
It's quite a surreal experience.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
with
But yeah, and then Fun Home, we hung out a lot and still do.
oh, I imagine, yeah. I have to say, I'm personally biased. Assassins was a particularly memorable show for me. I was
That
in.
is that the first? Was that the first conversation we had? Wasn't it
I'm
about
sure it was.
Assassins? Yeah.
I'm sure it was because it was. I was brought to the show when I was a freshman. I think it was my spring semester of my freshman year at NYU, and I didn't really know what the show was about. I admit I was kind of ignorant about it. I'd heard, it's about presidential assassins. I said, who the hell makes a musical out of that?
Stephen
Well,
Sondheim and John
yes,
Weidman, as
Steve
it turns out.
Sondheim. And I went to it, and I was floored by the just the concept of the whole thing, and just the sheer star power. I mean, as someone that enjoys what I would say like our character actors, it's a
Right.
character actor's dream.
Yeah.
It's immensely populated by nothing but character actors. So like, I'm curious to know, that experience that you had, I guess was in 2004.
Yes.
And how do you, like, now we're, I have, 16 years past that, and about to enter a new presidential election. Like, how does,
Yeah.
I mean, that was in the spring of 2004, so we were on the verge of electing Bush again.
Right.
What does the show feel like to you nowadays? Do you feel like it holds up?
Absolutely. There was a production of it at Encore's maybe 2 years ago. I don't think it was last year, but and there's a production that was starting rehearsals the day that things started to be shut down in New York at Classic Stage Company, with a lot of friends of mine. Judy Kuhn is in it, and I think everybody in the cast was somebody that I knew, and I was excited to see what it's going to be like. Also because John Doyle is directing that production too, so I was excited to see what it was going to look like at this present moment. But it really is a timeless sort of piece, and it's about holding up a mirror to the American psyche, and it's not a very flattering mirror. And it really, for me, kind of fits in a trio with Pacific Overtures and Roadshow, which are both also Sondheim Weidman shows, and similarly are really asking questions about who America is, and what America is, and why is it in the condition it's in. And Assassins, to me, is essentially asking, people get outraged about it, or get anxious about it because they feel like it's glorifying these murderers, and it is not, and it very clearly is not if you spend any time looking at it. But what it does do is make us acknowledge that these people are a particularly American creation. I mean, our country has more successful and attempted assassinations of our president than anybody else, I think. And there's worth asking why that is. And I think Assassins comes down, at least in part, on the side of saying, well, if the pursuit of happiness, if your own personal happiness is the primary function of every citizen of the country, is that maybe a problem? It's not like, the happiness of your neighbor or the happiness of your fellow man is your primary directive. It's just like, no, I have a feeling, I feel like my voice is suppressed. I feel like I need to be heard, and I can take whatever measures I deem necessary to feel that way, to do that. And I'm justified to do that because it's my right guaranteed in the Constitution. And
And that's a particularly interesting message now with even with the COVID scare, because it's so many of us that, like you and myself, are presumably healthy. We have to make these sacrifices, not for us, that is
right,
for someone else. And there is,
absolutely.
and the COVID has been politicized in such a way that really pits people as a, I'm doing right for everyone else, or I'm going to do what I need to do for me.
Yeah, for me and mine. And we're also seeing really laid clear that inequities in our society, and COVID is affecting African American population so much more heavily than than white population, um, and and even more people who have money and access to healthcare and to groceries, and who can afford to order from Amazon, and people who have to go outside and go to do it, or people who have to go to work in the supermarkets so that others of us can buy stuff in the supermarkets. It just like Katrina and and 9/11 and any disastrous moment in our history, this is a real, and maybe more than all of those things, even as terrible as they absolutely were, um, but it's an opportunity for us to really ask some questions about the way we live and the way we conduct ourselves as a society, and how we look at the other people that we are in the society with, and really have an opportunity to change that radically. And we'll see if we do. We'll see. we
Sure,
we have a knack for not learning the right lessons in things, and
we do.
you know
We do. And I think, yeah, a show like Assassin certainly elevates that message. I'm
yeah.
curious if you could do, like, in relationship to that show, because it is a show that you can return to. Is there if you could play other roles, which would you have a role?
Ooh, that's a good question. I loved playing John Wilkes Booth, and I feel like that that's the role that I was supposed to play.
Mm.
Um, I do think. I loved Dennis O'Hare's uh, performance too, and I think. Uh, oh, what was his character's name?
Guiteau?
Gateau. Yeah, I think I think that character is really fascinating. Zangaro is. They're all so tricky and hard and interesting in their own ways. Zangaro is like so intense. That would be a real challenge. Um, uh,
Was that show your first time doing Sondheim on Broadway?
yes. Yeah.
Because after that, subsequently, you did Sweeney Todd.
Right.
And you've done Sondheim before. I mean, the first time I actually saw you I was in high school. I saw Chicago Shakespeare's A Little Night Music.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, yes, yes. It was delightful. That's because I remember when I saw Assassins, I said, "Wait a second." I was like, "The guy playing John Wilkes Booth, that must be a wig because I think I've seen him before. He's bald."
The mustache looks kind of the same, but
Yeah, the mustache looks
that's so funny.
similar.
I love that production. Was so fun, and playing Carl Magnus was a blast. Like
Oh, I'm sure.
absolutely fun role.
And now here we are spending our weekend in the country. But
Yeah, yeah.
what it like? What's it like? I'm sure a lot of theater people are curious. Like, well, what's it like with that type of pressure, performing Sondheim while he's in the room, while he's
Yeah,
present?
it's daunting because of what you bring to it. He's great, and he loves actors, and he loves uh, musicians, and he loves to see people kind of return his work to him with their performances and stuff. So he's a great audience, and
Oh
he
yeah,
laughs and he cries, and um, but we inevitably like revere him, and I am particularly bad at figuring out a way to kind of get over that. So it always takes me a little while to kind of just feel like, oh yeah, it's Steve, that I work with.
Yeah.
And in the early days, that was even harder when I hadn't spent as much time around him. Um, I had luckily by that time done several things that he had come to see in Ravinia in Chicago. I'd
Hmm.
done a couple of concert versions of Sunday in the Park and Anyone Can Whistle,
I saw
and
your
he.
Sunday. That was very good.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, because I'm from Chicago. I was
Yeah,
home
I
for the
always
summer.
forget that. Yeah, I love those. Every summer for a number of years, we would do these great staged concert readings of Sondheim shows,
And they were fabulous. I'm curious. Is
um, and I had done Passion at the Kennedy Center. That was where I met him.
okay.
What's that?
No, wait. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
It got corrupted for a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you did. So you did Passion at the Kennedy Center. That was before Assassins, then.
That was before Assassins. That was the first time I had done a show that Steve was going to be there to see and be, a part of rehearsals for at least a little bit. Um, so that show, because it was a summer thing and the whole festival was so amazing, and he hung out for most of the summer, and so he would come out with everybody afterwards, and that I started to get to be a little more relaxed and comfortable around him because he was
Sure.
out socially. Um, but with Assassins, he was there throughout because he and John Weidman were part of rehearsals and stuff, um, and it's great because you have access to the source, and so if you have a question about something, you can get it answered directly and quickly. But it is really daunting, and there had been the previous version of Assassins at Playwrights Horizons that they had hoped would come to Broadway, but got uh, kind of stopped in its tracks by the Gulf War.
Mm.
um, so this was kind of their chance to finally see it become what they had hoped it was going to be. And similarly to Passion, which had kind of become, it wasn't surprising that you wouldn't have known it so well in the beginning, because it was kind of like the poor stepchild of the Sondheim canon. People didn't know it all that well. Um, so it was really great being able to have him there. And I remember it also, though, makes for opportunities for you to embarrass yourself further. I remember I had done all this research because I'm always really into doing lots of research and especially if it's a historical character, there's lots that you can learn. Um, so I realized that Booth died in what was going to be his 27th year, but he died a few weeks or months shy of his 27th birthday. So he was actually 26 when he died. And there's a line in the Ballad of Booth, the balladeer sings 27 years of age. And so I went to Steve one day and said, Steve, I've been doing all this reading, this research, and I realized that Booth died on this date, and his birthday, his 27th birthday, was going to be a few months later. So actually, he was 26, and he was just quiet for a minute, and he said, "27 sings better." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, and yes, of course, that's fine. That's my answer."
And yeah, the master has spoken.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any of his shows? I mean, you've been blessed that you've done so many of them. Is there any that you haven't done that you would like to touch at some point?
Um, well, there are ones that, like, I would love to play Frederick in Night Music. Um, I would I would love to do George and Sunday in the Park in a full production. I'd only done that concert version, and every time it comes up in New York, the first time it was this English actor who did the
Yeah,
first big revival, um, and
Jake
then Jake
Gyllenhaal.
Gyllenhaal just did it. So it keeps getting, the theater's going to have to be bigger and bigger for me to be far enough from the audience for it to be convincing if I keep getting older and other people keep doing it. Um, but that's one I really love. What other ones?
How about Follies? Or
Oh
that?
yeah, I actually had a chance to be in the Bernadette Peters one, but it conflicted with something else I was already doing, so I couldn't do it. That's yeah, and that's one that I'll continue to age into, I think. So
Yeah,
um,
that's the good thing about Follies is that
yeah,
you're really like
yeah,
it's like a fine wine. It gets your performance will get better as you age.
exactly, exactly. The more life wears you out, the better he'll be.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I don't. I want to be cognizant of time, and so just a couple like a quick kind of quick fire questions. I'm
sure.
curious. Is there anything that like a director or maybe even an acting teacher from your youth said that has it really stuck with you that you kind of take into every process?
Um, well, I learned so much from John Doyle doing Sweeney Todd. And I was, kind of deep into my career, but he practices so many of the things that I learned in school and so many of the things that I was sort of taught then. Um, he really, he really tries hard. He's one of the few directors I've known who will say something like, there really are no wrong choices. There are choices that we'll decide, are the ones that we want to use, but that's not your job to figure out. Your job as an actor is just to offer me a million options, and so I want you to just be an inventing machine and not be editing yourself and not be trying to second guess yourself. And the rehearsals with him, really bore that out. And so I try, even with a director who's not, who doesn't necessarily treat rehearsals that way, I still like to try to give myself that kind of permission, because if i'm if I don't try something because I'm afraid I'm going to look stupid, um, then I might be removing the one choice that I would make that might have seemed stupid but actually turns out to be the perfect choice, or the ideal, and different kind of choice, instead of just being safe with
Yeah.
interpretations of things. So that would be one thing, definitely. And I think in school, maybe I got a lot of great advice from a lot of teachers, but um, one one bit, I remember there was an actress who was doing a scene from it's probably Tennessee Williams, and who was, just like sobbing through it and was clearly having a very personal connection and a deep emotional attachment to this scene. And our teacher afterwards said, it's not really important what you feel when you're performing. What's important is what the audience feels. You don't actually have to put yourself through, this psychologically damaging ordeal and dredge up, every agonizing bit of your past and disembowel yourself for our enjoyment, if you can't make us have that same response. Like, you having it and you feeling all the feels doesn't mean anything if you're not eliciting that with us. And if you can elicit that from the audience, technically you don't need to go through all of that. And in fact, nobody can really, night after night, in a long run. So um so that idea that your focus is not on having a particular emotional experience yourself in a show. Your job is to give that experience to the audience. That I have found a really valuable thing. And then the last thing that a teacher said to me in college, said to all of us, was that ultimately one of the fundamental things you need as an actor is a humble belief that we should pay attention to you, that you have a right to stand on the stage and and expect us to listen to you, because what you have to say and who you are simply by being there is inherently interesting. And and of course everybody should feel that all the time in their lives, but so often we don't. And so often you can find yourself kind of apologizing for being on stage, or or asking the audience for their attention, but at the same time kind of saying, I know I don't really deserve it, but if you could kind of listen to me, that would be really nice. um, and then you see the opposite of people who stand on stage and seem to think that everybody should be kneeling in front of them just because they're on stage, and that's not very interesting
Yeah.
either. Although sometimes it can be entertaining.
And
um,
oftentimes I find with, because I teach young actors, I find that
sure.
they get on stage and they become so self-conscious.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to tell the students that, you could walk into a theater and see the most fabulous scenic design on earth, but it becomes 100 million times more interesting the second that a human being steps
Yeah.
onto the stage, because we're drawn to humans. And so you have to trust sometimes, like you said, that you're worthy to be up there. um, but also you also have to have the self-confidence to know that you also have to find relaxation, and you have to be able to be a human on stage, because the audience will sense if you're acting at being a human.
Right, exactly. Do you know that I think it's a poem of Brecht's about people, when there are construction sites and then there's like the hole cut out in the wooden wall, along the sidewalk, and people will just stand and look through the hole and watch people building a building. And he has this whole poem about why that is, and that it's just inherently interesting to see human beings doing what they do and living their lives. And I mean, it's the whole reason for shows like Big Brother and reality TV, although there's nothing human in any of that stuff. um, but that people will stop and watch a bricklayer just laying bricks, who's not laying the bricks so that you can watch, he's laying the bricks so that a building will go up. And that's what acting should be. You should be doing your tasks and doing your work, and that's what's going to make it interesting for the audience. And you're building the building of this story. You're not doing it for the audience, you're doing it to build the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to kind of to conclude our segment together. Last thing I'll just say is, once this thing, God willing, passes, with hopefully as minimal loss of life as possible, and you're back in New Orleans, like what's the first restaurant that you want to go back to?
Ooh, good question. I think I'm just going to do like one long eating spree that'll start at Willie Mays maybe, or go down to Elizabeth's and maybe have some fish over at Pesh. And I'm just gonna eat my way through New Orleans probably.
Well,
I've
hopefully.
actually been I've actually been ordering. There's a place called the Cajun Grocer from somewhere out in Louisiana that I can get some like red beans and stuff. So I've been making myself red beans on Monday nights with actual good Red Runner red beans. So I
Yes.
don't have all the stuff to make red beans myself.
Well, that's fantastic. Hopefully, we'll see you back sometime in October, when apparently every festival on the face of the earth is happening.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it'll be nice to be overwhelmed in that way.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a gift at this time. So
But I hope I'm there long before that. So we'll see.
I agree. We would love to see you. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your wisdom and experience. And I'm sure everyone at the NOLA Project would, love to see you in a NOLA Project production at some point.
I
Hey,
would love that too.
that would be fantastic. So, thank you again on behalf of all of us, and we'll stay safe. Okay.
Thanks, you all too, and just send my love to everybody there, and I'll be home soon.
All right.